On today's Two on Your Side Town Hall, a week ahead of Election Day, we look at a campaign season that has gotten nasty, deceptive, and really competitive.
Plus, a Buffalo City lawmaker has a proposal to make big changes at the Broadway market. We've heard that before. We're going to ask him why this effort is more likely to succeed.
And a new salvo in the back and forth over the strike at Mercy Hospital. We get to the bottom of both sides' claims.
And good evening to you. We're glad you're here with us. Exactly a week from today is Election Day, although people are actively casting ballots right now thanks to early voting. If you feel like this has been an especially negative campaign season, you are not alone.
You know, we've heard from a lot of people asking us to fact check ads and mailers and statements from candidates in all kinds of different races. So you have Democratic Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown, who is running as a write-in candidate since he lost the primary, repeatedly claiming in ads that his opponent, India Walton, will fire 100 police officers. Our verified team found his ads to be false. A nonprofit came up with the cost savings plan that Walton backed, and it does not include a single layoff.
Brown is a Democrat. Then you have Republican Stefan Mihailu. He's running for supervisor in Hamburg. He has repeatedly lied, saying his opponent, Randy Hoke, will defund the police. Hoke has actually called for increasing the Hamburg police budget. Despite that, Mihailu posts on Twitter and Facebook almost every single day saying the opposite.
And then there's Conservative and Republican Party candidate Lynn Dixon, who is running for Erie County Controller. Her opponent, Kevin Hardwick, used to be a Republican, but now he's a Democrat. Dixon has falsely said in this mailer that he supports former President Trump and is against gay marriage. And just last night, Dixon's former Independence Party sent out text connecting Hardwick to Mihailu. In reality, Dixon works for Mihailu, making this a clear effort to deceive voters.
So when you look at all that, you may be wondering, what is going on? What are we to make of all of these dishonest attacks coming from lots of candidates, from lots of parties, in lots of different races? Well, here to discuss that and more with us right now is Shawn Donahue, an assistant professor of political science at UB's College of Arts and Sciences. We appreciate you coming on the show, Professor.
Thank you.
And right out of the gate, I feel like we may have viewers reacting to this with, well, what else is new? I mean, we know attack ads are common and that they generally also work. We know politicians aren't always honest, but does this cycle seem unique to you as someone who studies this, especially since it's an off-year election, we don't have any statewide or federal races? Why is it so dishonest, and what stands out to you?
Well, I think one of the things is that campaigns are doing this because they think they can get away with it and they think that it'll work. Given that we don't have as many high-profile state or national offices, it does mean that we are looking at more of the political coverage is going to be on local races. I think is why we're seeing it more at the local level this year.
Professor, political scientists like yourself study elections, you study voters and trends, and we always really do hear that candidates are out there doing these negative attack ads because they say that they work, right? You go negative and then, and oftentimes you end up picking up some votes. Do you subscribe to that thinking, or are there circumstances in which you think maybe voters punish candidates who lie or deceive?
There are occasionally, sometimes when a campaign may go just a little bit too far or way too far, might be a better way of putting it, and voters may decide to punish one particular candidate. But generally what campaigns are trying to do is to define their opponent before they can define themselves.
And we know that early voting kicked off this past Saturday, and in the first 2 days, we have more than 7,000 people voting in Erie County. Compare that to the primary, when fewer than 1,500 people voted in the county on those first 2 days. So there seems to be high interest, but we still have some very important elections in odd years. What's your reaction to the turnout that we've seen so far?
Well, it seems like that the Buffalo mayor's race is not only the highest profile race in Western New York, but it's also one of the more high profile races nationally this year in an off-year election. So it's generated a considerable amount of interest. And also, we have a sheriff's election that has also generated a considerable amount of interest that has helped to drive early voting turnout. And this is going to be the first year we've had a mayor's race in New York where we've actually had early voting as well.
Yeah, we forget how how new early voting still is. You're right, you've got that Virginia governor's race, which is getting a lot of attention, but there are a lot of national media outlets that are here in Buffalo right now covering the lead up to this. So I think it is going to make a lot of national headlines. And it is the highest profile race that we have here locally. We should mention after this interview, we're going to have some new reporting that we'll share on a big donor in that campaign. But generally, how do you size up the race for mayor right now? We have that final debate between the candidates tomorrow. We know that they are, very active, trying to get people out to do early voting. Where do you see this standing right now?
Well, it seems like that we have a very competitive race. We don't have a whole lot of public polling in the race, and it's not very easy to do public polling whenever you have one candidate as a write-in candidate, because literally you can't ask, if the election were held today and you saw these two names on the ballot, who would you vote for? Because you're only going to see one. I think it's right now that the candidates have moved more from persuasion into turnout to try to get their supporters out to vote early. I know that, we also have some people that have cast mail-in absentee ballots as well. And I think it's particularly interesting that we actually have a second debate. It didn't seem like that we were going to have a second one, but now that we have, Ms. Walton has agreed to that. So it also seems like both candidates are very well financed right now. I think you're going to talk a little bit more about that after this segment. And I think we can expect it's going to be an interesting 7 days until the polls close next Tuesday.
Shawn, I'm curious about what you think about this sort of big picture, not only what voters think as they approach this whole process, but even people running for office who would look at this and say, I'm not going to get involved in something like that. What is the impact of this, do you think, overall?
Well, that is a good point that, if you're having so much negativity, it could draw away people that might be interested in running for office in the future. As things get particularly negative. But, we've had negative campaigns that go back a long time. Think back to 1964 and the Daisy ad used against Barry Goldwater, or the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth that was used against John Kerry, or the Willie Horton ad. So I think this is something that we've had for a long time and we're going to continue to have in the future.
We appreciate the perspective so much. We've been chatting here with UB Professor Shawn Donahue. Thanks again for your time.
It's my pleasure.
Well, sticking with Decision 2021 right now, and a story from our nonprofit partners at Investigative Post. You might remember months ago, after India Walton upset Byron Brown in that Democratic primary, developer Carl Palladino pledged to fund the write-in campaign for Mayor Brown.
And that led to a lot of backlash because of Palladino's history of racist comments and support for President Trump. And Mayor Brown pledged not to take any of his money. Well, that's not what happened, according to IP, which looked at the latest financial filings and found $10,000 from two LLCs that share an address with Palladino's Ellicott development.
Under state law, we should be able to know who owns those LLCs if they're going to donate money. But reporter Jeff Kelly, who wrote the article for Investigative Post, says the Brown campaign listed the owners of every other LLC listed in his filing, except these two.
The Brown campaign doesn't usually do that. They didn't do it this time with the Palladino LLCs, although they did it with all the others who gave to them. Ellicott Development maintains a number of LLCs. Lots of real estate companies do this to control various properties that they own. These are just two of the many LLCs that Ellicott Development has. And in the past, Palladino has used these LLCs to donate to campaigns.
So we reached out to the Brown campaign. They shared this statement saying, quote, "The Brown campaign has not accepted any contributions from Carl Palladino. These two groups are not owned by or affiliated with him." Jeff Kelly says the facts completely contradict that.
It is flat untrue. You can check property records, I have, and you can see that the properties that these one LLC in particular, 1291 Group, owns, for example, 474 Michigan, which is a Ellicott development project and property. The other properties that they own are also clearly Ellicott development properties. Court records show that these are owned and controlled by Ellicott Development, which is Carl Palladino.
So now you know, but Jeff does say this late in the race and with a lot of votes already cast that this might not have that big of an impact on the race overall.
But it shows what you can find when you follow the money, which Jeff has been doing very well. You can read more about this report and check out the filings. Just go to investigativepost.org.